This meeting is indeed being recorded. Thank you, Miss Zoom. I actually wish it would happen the opposite way. I often forget to record some of my staff meetings and in-services, and we're joking that I actually need that lady to butt in and say, this meeting isn't being recorded. Sam, can you please hit record so that you don't get frustrated later on?
So just check in. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Welcome everyone back to the Tokyo Living podcast. And just as I checked the numbers this morning, we've tipped over 1,000 downloads over the 21 episodes that we've been running. So thank you everyone for your support. Today's guest is now a regular on the show, back on for, I believe, the third time. CBT practitioner Colin Coxall. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, you're welcome, Sam. It's a pleasure being back. Thanks for having me again.
No, it's good to have you back. So we're going to dive straight in. If you're not familiar with Colin, I think if you go back to episode 4 and I believe episode 13 or 14, he's been on the show a couple of times talking about different topics. There's a lot that we can pick his brain about. The previous episode, we talked a little bit about sleep. Today, we're going to touch on the topic of worry. So perhaps, Colin, if you could just start by explaining what actually is meant by worry. I mean, people, I worry about this, I worry about that. But in a scientific perspective, and as far as psychological interventions go, how would you sort of define worry and how do you sort of interpret that term?
Yeah, I mean, everybody worries, Sam. It's really quite normal. I think the problem is, if people worry too much, if they're consumed by worry, can be a problem. I mean, if it's really crucial for us, when whenever I go out, to well, obviously not so much now with the state of emergency, but whenever I would go out to the station to, go into the office, I always check that I've got my Suki card with me. For example, I go to the airport, which I haven't been for a long time now.
What's an airport?
Those things that
planes, yes.
Yeah.
Remember.
We'll always check my passport. I'll go to the drawer, get my passport out, put it on the luggage. In the morning, I'll double check. So when I go out, I might check the oven. Make sure I haven't left it on. So it is really important for our well-being. So it's useful to a point, okay? I think the problem with worry is that, when worries become, molehills, become mountains, I think when people start sort of imagining, bad things, so if I checked my oven and it was off and I went out and I thought to myself, actually, what if I did leave the oven on, and I had these sort of catastrophic images and, I become fearful of my worry, it can be a real problem. I mean, there's lots of, potentially negative consequences of worry, potentially. I mean, things like, as I say, we're looking for trouble. It can affect our concentration. We live our life, people can live their life in their heads, rather than kind of in the real world. It can be hard to make decisions. People might expect the worst. They keep focusing from one problem to another. It can make people less efficient, in terms of their performance, for example, and reaching their full potential. They start to kind of rely on others. So with my passport, for example, I might kind of delegate that to, my partner and ask if, they could look after my passport just in case I kind of forget it, So it lowers people's confidence, become confused by checking too much. There's this sense of dread with worry. It can seem to get out of control. It can be overwhelming. Kind of impact people's ability to relax. People can be tired, tense, muscle aches, headaches. You probably see a lot of this, down, in the physio down at the gym.
Sure.
So there's lots of, even though there's lots of good things about worry, it can flip into negative consequences if they're unintended negative consequences, if there's too much of it.
Is this something that, I mean, this is a different topic altogether, but is this sort of some of the basis of like a obsessive compulsive disorder? I mean, you mentioned leaving, thinking you've left the oven on, and then maybe thinking back to that over the course of the day. I know everyone says, "Oh, I'm OCD about this, I'm OCD about that," but we've had one or two patients that clinically have that obsessive compulsive disorder, and they sometimes arrive 30 minutes late to an appointment because they actually got on the train and then weren't sure if they've shut the door, got off, and then gone back. I'm just wondering if that sort of maybe something that stems from excessive worry.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the actual process of worry, you mainly find it in something called generalized anxiety disorder, which 1 in 20 people would have. I mean, that's the most common thing, and it's kind of worry. It's all, what if this happens, and that in itself can fuel anxiety, and then that can feel like it's out, and then you get the negative consequences from that. People keep doing that because it really undermines their confidence, can impact their mood, and negatively impact their mood, and it's overwhelming. It's really tiring as well. So it's mainly in something called generalized anxiety disorder, but it is a process. It's it's something that people do, and it is a process that is in obsessive compulsive disorder as well. I think the main difference between the two is that worry really is, or generalized anxiety is really sort of often characterized by this trying to solve a problem by asking what if, and it just keeps going around in a cycle. And even though that happens in OCD, it's much more of reacting with compulsions. So you get the obsessions, and then you get the compulsions, and the compulsions really are to reduce the distress. So I mean, there can be quite specific obsessions, and OCD can really be about anything at all, you see. And the compulsions are really to reduce the distress caused by the obsessions. There's a big overlap between the two, and actually, I think the truth is that worry is a process that covers lots of different disorders, like eating disorders as well, trauma. But there are very specific kind of flavors of the different disorders. So it's probably a bit of both, Sam. That's my long-winded, fluffy answer, nebulous answer. Apologies.
No, that's okay. That's great. I always, in different conversations with health practitioners, always bring things back to my field of musculoskeletal disorders. If someone is in chronic pain, we know that their response to a certain stimulus, their tolerance to a certain amount of load is decreased over time. If someone has generalized anxiety disorder, is it that they start to worry about more minor things, and the worry starts to build, and then they sort of start to actually worry about the worry, and does it sort of snowball in that way?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. I mean, what you're talking about is that, even within worry, I mean, there's no kind of one way to treat worry. I mean, in kind of 40 years of treating worry, there's about 4 sort of quite reliable what you might call protocols to treat worry, but they're all different, so the theory's out, and I think what they can all kind of play together. And what you're describing is when you worry about things, and people can have positive reasons for worrying, you see. So people might think it's it helps me solve problems. People might think it shows that I care. People might think that, if I worry about something, then, nothing bad is going to happen. Some people think, well, if I worry, then I'll deal with the bad outcome. So if I worry about it now, it's not going to be as bad. You know, so there are reasons why people worry, what you might call kind of, you know, positive reasons. But what you're talking about is how it flips into another type of worry, which is a worry about worry, you know, and then you get the negative consequences, such as, you know, it feeling out of control. You know, this worry is going to be the death of me. You know, it's going to send me crazy. You know, I mean, it won't. I mean, it's quite normal, but it becomes another worry. And then you get kind of, you know, trapped into it, you know, into these kind of cycles of, you know, trying not to think about things and, you know, not taking risks, you know, and, you know, there's also the, you know, the role of uncertainty as well. You know, I mean, it's also something about, I think, controlling things that maybe you don't need to control, you know, on that thing that flies. You know, you often see people sort of, you know, holding onto the handrails, and every noise they're calling. I said, "What was that?" You know, I mean, it sounds cruel, but it's not going to stop the plane from crashing. You know, it's you know, you just need to relax and just let it go, really. You know, if that makes sense.
You described 4 sort of, I guess, what's broad categories of treatment types for worry. What are they?
The broad treatment types. Okay, so you've got they all interplay together, and I mean, you know, there's a danger here that I could sound too. Well, certainly won't sound too intellectual, that's for sure. But you know, I don't want to get too clinically oriented, but they are basically the idea of uncertainty. One is uncertainty being the trigger for worry. So you have something like a worry chain. Okay. Now we're talking about generalized anxiety disorder, and I just want to emphasize that worry cuts across all of the you know, particular anxiety. So everybody worries. It's fine. It's just when it becomes a problem, and it's most manifest in generalized anxiety disorder, and it is in OCD as well. Okay. But you've got the trigger, which is uncertainty, which is often outside of people's awareness, which triggers this what if, and it triggers worry, you know, which is the kind of mental process and keep, you know, churning it over and over again. It doesn't really go anywhere. It goes in cycles, which creates anxiety, which creates the negative consequences. Now, in that particular model, uncertainty is the thing that really is targeted. But really, you know, uncertainty is normal. You know, it's a fact of life. It's not unfair. It's around us. People assume, you know, with this kind of problem, assume that they can convince themselves that, you know, they can't cope and that everything's going to go terribly wrong. Well, generally, people can cope, and usually, instead of expecting the worst, it's good to expect the best. Another type of model you described is the what you call the metacognitive model, which is Adrian Wells' model. I should try not to throw out names as though you know, I'm an expert about this. I'm not. I've just read a lot about it, helped a lot of people with this problem. So then there's type A, type B, where worry flips into it being unhelpful, you know, into you know, worry about worry. And another model, the other main model is interestingly, worry as avoidance, you know, as emotional avoidance, because when people worry, they can get quite stressed about the worry. So they try and avoid it at all costs. Okay. But then, you know, it just kind of flips. If you try not to think about a pink elephant, Sam, don't think of a pink elephant. And if I sat here and said, don't do it, what are you going to think of?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And that's like worry. So, you know, all of those can interplay. I mean, my job really is about sort of just working out what is keeping it going for the individual, you know, that comes to see me. I think some people I think the problem with treating worry, and also the problem with treating OCD as well, is that really it's not actually about the content. If you get embroiled in the content, it's like sifting through sand. You know, it just go, you know, it's the process that you need. You know, you need to step back and look at the process of the worry, and understand what's keeping it going, as well as,
Sure.
you know, as I say, in OCD, you need to understand, you know, the process and the kind of type of obsession it is and what is keeping it going. You see, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. If that answers your question, all about
Absolutely. Yeah.
process. No, don't get embroiled in the content. You know, this is why, you know, I mean, I come from a counselling background, and you know, I know that, you know, if you go and, you know, see a brilliant counsellor, there's some brilliant counsellors out there, but if you're just constantly talking about your worries, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But often it doesn't go anywhere. You know, I mean, there's
Right.
some brilliant counsellors who understand that and understand the process and
Mm.
stuff. But just talking about worries, if you have a problem with worry, isn't going to resolve the issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
For
in no
sure.
way criticism, because there's brilliant practitioners out there, and I'm no better than any other practitioner. It's just that I take a particular interest in this area.
Yeah. Okay. So perhaps then if we can maybe just go through a bit of a case study and just show a practical example of how you would take someone who is suffering from the effect of worry and sort of manage that condition.
Yeah. Okay then. Well, I do have a case study. I mean, if I can read a case study to you if you like, and you can maybe ask some questions as we go along about what you would do, and I don't know,
Sure.
what do you think? Let's just see how that goes.
Perfect. Yeah. Let's
All right.
roll with that and see how we go.
Okay, so it's just you and I here, Sam. So this is something about confidentiality, obviously. You know, it's clinical material, so not to share it too widely. Okay,
Yeah.
is that all right? Yeah. Okay. So this is the story of Mr. Worry.
Yep.
Roger Hargreaves wrote this in 1970s, but it still really stands the test of time. Okay, there's all the other
Yep.
Mr. Men characters there. Okay, so this is the story of Mr. Worry. I'll read the story out to you. Just dive in with any questions. So poor Mr. Worry, whatever happened, he worried about it. If it rained, he worried that his roof was going to leak. If it didn't rain, he worried that all the plants in his garden were going to die. If he set off shopping, he worried that the shops would be shut when he got there. And when the shops weren't shut when he got there, he worried that he was spending too much money shopping. And when he got home with his shopping, he worried that he'd left something behind, or that something had fallen out of his basket on the way home. So you get a flavour of lots of different worries, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when he got home, he discovered that he hadn't left anything behind, and that nothing had fallen out of his basket on the way home. He worried that he'd bought too much. And then he worried about where to put it all. Life was just one long worry for poor Mr. Worry. So you see it's shifting. All right.
Yeah.
So that's the thing about worry. It's shifting from one thing to another. It's not really resolved. This is all what if. And one of the things about worry is you need to really shift it into, you know, problem solving, into an action. Okay.
Yep.
So one day he went for a walk. He was worried that he might walk too far and not be able to get home. But on the other hand, he was worried that if he didn't walk far enough, he wouldn't get enough exercise. He hurried along worrying. Or you could say he worried along hurrying. He met Mr. Bump. I'm very worried about you, he said. Why is that? Asked Mr. Bump. I'm worried that one of these days you might hurt yourself, he said. Oh, don't you worry your head. Don't you worry your head about that. It's all in his head, you see, replied Mr. Bump, and he went off, tripping over his own feet. And Mr. Worry went on, and then he met Mr. Noisy, and then he met Mr. Greedy. And you see, he's worrying about all these people, but it's all in his head, and that's how it can impact the quality of your life, you see, because you're not really, you know, doing stuff that you know, he's not saying, oh, come on, let's go and hang out, and you know, let's go for a meal together. How are you doing? You know, what you've been up to? It's all, I'm worried about you. You know, so this is one of the things that keeps worry going. That you know, worry shows that he cares. Well, it doesn't. I mean, caring, doing things shows that you care about people. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Is this making sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So if Mr. Worry then came into your clinic, what are the key things that you would start to focus on with him?
Right. Well, one of the things would be to look at some of those beliefs around worry, so asking, about the quality of his life and whether, it's improving the quality of his relationships, whether actually, maybe testing things out about worry, how would he feel if he actually went out for spent some time with, Mr. Noisy, for example, or Mr. Bump, you know? Um, and another thing I would do now, Mr. Worry meets a wizard. Okay, and the wizard is a very nice kind of wizard, very helpful. And he says to Mr. Worry, he says, "Okay, well, write everything down, write all your worries down, and I'll take care of those worries." And so he writes them all down, gives them to the wizard, and the wizard said, "Right, fine, you're not going to worry anymore." And that's absolutely fine. But again, that's getting into the content of the worry, which isn't important really, because all of these worries that he has, this big long list of worries that he has, that's not really important. What's important is that he is able to sift through the worries and to find out what worries are important, or what worries are helpful, or what are the worries that he can problem solve, what are the worries that are a call to action, what are the worries that tell him something about his life. So he was worried about, Mr. Bump. Go and spend some time with Mr. Bump. Nurture the relationship, isn't it really? So the wizard kind of makes the mistake of getting caught into the content of things, whereas I would be really dealing with the process. So I'd be maybe keeping a diary, a worry diary, and a worry diary would really just be about working out what are the helpful worries and what are the unhelpful worries. Once we separate out those, we can really halve Mr. Worry's worry. Okay, so just focus on the things that count, and that he can problem solve those worries. So really, he hasn't got any worries. In fact, Mr. Worry has only got one worry. Do you know what that is?
Worry.
He worries too much. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. So anyway, the wizard comes along. Mr. Worry is a happy man, and he doesn't worry. And suddenly, he says, on Monday morning, he was a worried man. Oh dear, what do you think was worrying him? Can you guess? He went to the wizard. Oh dear, said the wizard, when he saw him standing on his doorstep. What's worrying you? I'll tell you, said Mr. Worry. I'm worried because I don't have anything to worry about. And he went home to worry about not having anything to worry about, you see. So, all about the process, you see.
Yeah.
So there's something about testing. What I would be doing is testing out, some of his kind of belief, find out what his beliefs are around worry, testing them out. Is there a different way to do it? Worry solves things. It doesn't. It goes around in circles. Problem solving solves things. Worry stops bad things happening. No, it doesn't. That's superstition.
Yeah.
I mean, the other night I had my special chocolate, in the morning while I was watching England play against Denmark. My lucky little mascot, and
Well, we'll know by the time this airs. We'll know if it was truly lucky or not.
Well, that's the absolutely. So that's the reason why England won, right?
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Of course not. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's a superstition.
Yeah.
It's nice, but then if I didn't have it with me and I decided not to watch the match, I was too scared because I didn't have my lucky mascot. Well, I mean, that's
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense at all, but
it does. I mean, I guess starting to wrap up, if people are listening to this and they start to think about their own worries, I mean, you alluded to at the start that worry can have some positive outcomes. So you could argue that if you weren't worried about anything, if you weren't worried about your health, you weren't worried about your financial status, then there'd be no sort of motivation to
exactly.
work and to take care of yourself.
That's
how do you know
helpful.
when it's when does it? How do you know if it's starting to become a problem?
I think when it has some of the negative consequences, when it keeps going around in a cycle, it's not bringing anything to the table, really. I mean, really what you need to do with worry, as I say, is really to turn it into a statement and ask, is there anything I can do about this? What action can I take? And if there's nothing you can do about it, really it is a case of parking it. If there is something you can do about it, then do something about it. Either do it now or do it later. People spend their time worrying about the worst outcome. Well, sometimes the best outcome. It's better to think about the best outcome. It reminds me of Pooh Bear in 100 Acre Wood, and there's a big storm blowing, and they find shelter under a tree, and Piglet turns around to Pooh and says, what if the tree falls down, while we're underneath it? And Pooh, he thinks for a minute, and he says, yeah, but what if it doesn't? So you don't want to kind of be at one end of the spectrum, not caring at all right? But then again, you don't want to be at the other end of the spectrum where every worry is really sort of causing distress. In fact, if you're up there, you're probably doing better, but you want to shift it down a little bit and be, I guess, a little bit more in the middle with it, really. So that you're listening to the worry, that is helpful, that you invite the worry in, you listen to it, the worry is knocking on your door, you open the door to your friend worry. The first thing you're not going to do to your friend who's distressed is say, oh, can I solve your problem? No, you're not going to do that. You're going to say, come in, have a seat. Do you want a cup of tea? Just sit there for a minute, and what's on your mind? Is there anything you can do about it? Can you you need to kind of take a step back a little bit from the worries and decide if they're helpful. All the ones you described they're all helpful because they're all something you can do something about or make decisions about, you see. But there are other ones that are just unhelpful, and you just really need to park them. Yeah. I mean, what worries like a rocking chair? The worries in a rocking chair, but it's not. It's not really. It doesn't really get you anywhere.
Right. Yeah, that's a good analogy. All right, I think that's been really helpful. The book Mr. Worry, there's a YouTube clip which you've shown me before. We'll put the links to that because it's got a cool. I think the guy that narrates it sounds like the Fat Controller from Thomas the Tank Engine, very narration type voice. Or maybe I'm thinking of the wrong clip, but it was a very helpful clip, and it's very quick as well. And I think it helps summarize the type of stuff that you're talking about. And I think if people think about their worries and then watch that clip, it just starts to help to put it into context a bit. So we'll include that in the show notes. And then, of course, your details. So cbt.tokyo is your website. Is that correct?
Yep. That's right. Yep.
And if people want to book an appointment with you, they can do so through the Tokyo Medical and Surgical Clinic, and we'll put their details in the show notes as well.
Brilliant. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. Well, thank you very much for your time as always, Colin. And no doubt we'll get you back on in the near future and pick your brain about some more topics related to mental health. As always, if you've got any specific topics that you'd like Colin to speak about, let us know and we'll get him back on.
Thanks, Sam.
All right. Thanks, Colin. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Have a great day. Bye.